today. Alright, so today we are going to be talking about something a bit more complicated than we did last time. And today we're going to be talking about light. And the reason this is because light is an exceptionally important element that we have to manipulate when designing buildings. So let's get into it. So all light comes from the sun for us. And we, the Earth, orbit the sun. And depending where we are, and the Earth has its natural axis, and depending on where we are, the amount of light that the Earth gets changes during its orientation towards the sun. And that's how you get seasons. So if the Earth is sitting like that, the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. I'm just running through this because it'll make a lot of sense just now. When the sun is in this position, the light, as you can see, is heavily focused on the southern hemisphere. And you'll see there's an angle here that's been created. And similarly, if the sun is on the other side, let's just move this across. If the sun is on the other side, the northern hemisphere gets more light. For exactly the same reason. And again, that creates an angle. And there's a point, and that's when the sun is essentially in this position and in that position, or the Earth, sorry, where it's equal. And it's at that stage where it's at that point where the day and the night are the same length. Now you might ask yourself, why is this relevant to designing buildings? And the reason is because we have to design a building to be able to absorb or to so I'm just going to get to control the amount of light that enters the building. And the reason we need to control the amount of light is because sun is also heat. So heating and lighting are the main reasons why we have to control the amount of light that enters the building, or allow as much light that comes into it. So it's very much depending. So I just want to finish this here. Now I'm based in South Africa, which is in the southern hemisphere. So whatever I say, for example, that your building has to face north, you'll be direct opposite in the northern hemisphere. Your building has to face south. Most of our light comes from the north side, and whereas most of your light comes from the south side if you're in the northern hemisphere. And that's the same. All right. So what's happening is that I'm just going to draw a section of a building here, and I'll explain what's happening in a section, which makes it the most clear. So remember, the building is actually no, let's rather go 3D. So you've got your building like that, and you've got your windows on the front. All right. So what's happening is the sun is rising behind you and is moving around you during the day. And as it's doing, it's rising low and setting low, because the sun goes past the horizon line. So this here is the horizon line. But the sun doesn't just stay on that horizon line throughout. I mean, obviously, the more extreme you go, it will. It actually goes up and around. Oh, this is quite a. Let's just keep. I'll just do this rather. It goes up and around. It reaches its high point, and then it starts going down again. So it does this, this, and then it goes down again. That's really not great. Reaches its maximum, and then it goes down again. It's obviously a much smoother image. So what we can see with that image essentially is that the sun is also coming at a maximum point in the sky. And because of these angles that we described over here, the angle that the sun is in the sky changes. So in winter it'll be low, and as the seasons change, the sun will move up to its maximum point. And the angle that creates with the ground, that's called the azimuth. Now, if our building is sitting like this, in summer we want no light to enter our building, direct light. And there's many ways you can do that. You can, let's just go through that quickly. You can create shading on the front of the building, so like a porch or something. You can create a very deep overhang. So it's essentially the same kind of idea as this. Or we call these extended eaves. And an eave is this element over here that goes past, it goes past the building. The next one you can do is you can plant a tree here that loses its leaves in winter. So in summer it creates shade, because this is the sun. I'm drawing the lines of the sun here. So this is all shade. This is all shade. And here's the same. Now this tree is creating a lot of shade on that building. But then in winter, the thing is you actually want sunlight to enter your building. So if you've created this big awning in front, the amount of sun that's going to enter your building is going to be very little. It's only if actually going to touch your building. So now what you've done is you've created a bit of a problem. Whereas a tree would lose its leaves and allow light to enter into your building, so that your shading is actually only that. And the reason I'm drawing these angles, you'll see, is that it depends on where the sun is. So in summer, obviously the sun is up here, and as it winter, it moves down to here. So the extent that we need to create these angles is directly related to the angle of the sun. So how far you have to go out depends on where that sun is in the sky. Another thing you can do, is you can create shading, a screen or a louver. That closes or hides the windows, so that light doesn't enter the building. And the last thing is what you want to do is you actually want to create something like these natural elements. The trees are is the golden standard, so that in summer, if you've got your building, the glass is completely protected. So it's completely shaded because let's just draw that on a different layer. Because there's something that's blocking it, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a screening element, or maybe it's a tree, maybe it's an awning, whatever it may be. But then the thing is that in winter, you want to be able to remove it so that the sun can fully penetrate into the building and heat that building up. Hey, Fuchsia, how you doing? It's good to see you. Thanks for joining in. We're going a bit deep here on light. I hope you're ready. Very cool. Thanks for joining in. All right, so that's direct light. And that's from northern hemisphere. In northern hemisphere is from the south, and southern hemisphere is from the north. Cool. Happy to hear it. All right. So, lost my train of thought here. Just give me a sec. Where's that going to go? Okay. So, the ultimate thing to design, like I said, is something that can be removed. So, I'm looking at this top image over here. So, something that in summer it'll protect the glass, and in winter will expose the glass. That's actually what you want. You want this kind of changeable element that moves from between shading and exposure. Now let's quickly run through a couple of ways that you can do that. I'm just going to close this all here. It's getting a bit hectic. All right. So if you've got your building, the first thing you can do is that, so, okay, let's say you have to determine when you want and what point the angle of the sun has basically three kind of major points that you kind of pick, right? So there's summer, that's its highest point that it reaches in summer. This is winter, and these are solstices. This is the maximum that the sun will reach. And in South Africa or in Johannesburg, what you do is you pick the date that you have to pick when you have to start either shading or heating. So it's the day that the sun's angle that you want it to start hitting the glass. That day, let's get rid of that one, is the equinox. And the equinox is basically the day that the day-night are the same length. So when we design glazing, a facade, we want to make sure that when the sun is in these kinds of spaces here, that it doesn't hit the glass. So it's hitting either our eave or our wall maybe, and not the glass. So the glass is protected. And then when it comes to down this phase, that it can hit the glass and go into the building. We can do this all passively. So that means passively is that the building is closed off and it does it all by itself. Or we can create movable elements. I've described this, I'm just going a bit more detail here. And how you can do that is you can have an awning maybe that comes out during summer and that's retractable in winter. You can have a hinged element that moves up, that exposes the glass or closes the glass. You could have blinds that are angled in a certain way, so that they'd be angled, angled like that. And so the sun doesn't hit the glass, and then in winter you can move them, angle them up, so the sun can penetrate. All right, we're talking very technical here, and the big thing though is that what that does is if you use a technical component, there's a beauty that comes out of it. I've got a building here that I'm going to talk about. And it's a building in France. It's called the Hotel de Ville in Montpellier. This is the building. I was there a couple of years ago, and it's actually one of my favorite buildings. I actually was there, and I was actually quitting architecture. And after seeing this building, I fell so in love with it. I couldn't help myself. I had to go back. So maybe now I would have been an artist if it wasn't for that. All right, so how this building works is, as you can see, it's this very dark, black element. And what it's doing is that its facade, but you can also see it behind it, that there you can see windows. You can see there's light. There's some lights there. So there's actually offices. This is an office building. This is like their main administrative building in Montpellier. And well, I think it's in Montpellier. Yeah, it is in Montpellier. But so you can see that there's some element of translucency that's happening with this building. And what's actually happening is that this building, this is the facade. So this is taken from underneath, looking up at the building. It's got these. Sorry, let me just move this layer up. It's got these louvers. So you can see these louvers here. And what they're doing is they're essentially protecting the glass behind them. So when the sun comes in, it doesn't actually hit this glass. But when you're inside, so this is your really big eyes, you can still see out. So it creates a... Oh, cool. Yeah, absolutely. And so what's happening is that on the inside, the building is transparent from the inside looking out. And also what's happening is that the light from the sun will hit this little louver, and then it'll bounce, and then it'll come in. But this light that you're getting is indirect light. So it'll lose its heat. It won't be hot. And also what's happening is that with the bouncing, you're creating a more of a diffuse light, right? And in office spaces, this is very important, because any harsh direct light, if you know, if on computer screens and things, any kind of harsh, glaring direct light, I've got that same problem in where I'm working from now, is that I've got a window right next to me, and in the morning the sun comes and like hits me straight in the face. And so I've got to, use blinds and things to kind of control that. And that's the big thing with offices, that you need to make sure that the light is always even, consistent throughout the day, that it doesn't change, it's not variable. So diffuse light is the main thing. But also what's happening is that in offices, generally speaking, because there's so much equipment inside the office, there's computers, there's printers, there's people. People's a big one, actually. The building kind of heats itself. You don't actually need to heat it. So, and that's exactly what this building has done, is that it's opted for screening throughout the year. There are certain elements that can open, so these panels here can open, so that if you wanted to, you can let more light come in, and also ventilation, but mostly it's to do with the fact that this building doesn't need passive heating. Okay. However, what also happens with buildings with light is that this layer is that if you think of a building that's really long and deep. Sorry, this is a very big subject, so it'll probably take a couple of times for me to cover the whole thing. So let's say this is your building and you've got your roof on top, but it's a very deep building, very, very deep. So what happens now is that the sun, and you've only got windows on the front, and your sun comes in, you'll see that it's not getting very far into the building. It's maybe hitting a third of the building. Oh, sorry. So it means all of this here is in darkness. And it never gets any light. So let's just quickly... what am I doing here? Sorry, I just want to... So this is all in darkness. So the deeper the building gets, the more problems you're creating for your building as a heating point of view. So if you created this same building, but added a courtyard in the middle that was open to the sky, you'd effectively be creating two smaller buildings. So now what's happening is that the amount of darkness that you're creating is much less. And what's happening is now you've created this light well over here, and you can start planting trees here because it's a courtyard. You can do the same here. So by creating a courtyard, you're allowing more light into the space, and you're not creating such dark, dingy spaces as this one. Another thing you can do is, and everyone kind of knows this, is you can lift the roof up. Just make this a bit smaller. I'm just going to show a bunch of different strategies here on the side. So you can lift the roof up to let more light in. However, what that does is that means that during summer you're going to get more heat. So what you need to control the light that comes from the top, and maybe it's got louvers or something on it to do that. Another thing you can do is create skylights. I don't like skylights. I think they're a cop-out. I think there are better ways to do heating. You'll see, you know, warehouses have this kind of zigzag roof, and that's because they've got clear story windows, high-level windows at the top to let light in, and so that this whole space gets a lot of natural light. Whereas if they only had it on the front, then all of this would be dark. Another thing you can do, is actually do the skylights. So if your roof is like that, is you can create a skylight here that allows light to come in here. The problem with skylights again is that you can't control the heat. So that's a big problem. Another thing, so I'm just going to keep rambling because this is actually where I want to get to the building. The last thing you can do, or not last thing, there's a lot of things you can do, but let's say your building has this courtyard. So this is the courtyard. Let's say you put water inside this courtyard. Your building is like that. If light comes in and it hits this water, it's going to bounce and go into your building. So now you're creating indirect light that's got a bit of a pattern to it. And that's how you start creating a bit of poetry, because it's a functional thing, but there's an aesthetic beauty attached to it, this water element that you're creating. And this water won't just, I mean, there's direct reflection, but it'll also reflect in a kind of area and in a zone. And that's what this building in France did so successfully, which is why I loved it so much. So this is the center, the inside of that building. Let me just quickly, I'll do a quick sketch explaining how this building works. So what you do is, this building is essentially a box, and then they've got the facade that we first saw was over here, and then you can walk around it, and then they've got this open center point. And then what they've done is they've added water over here. So the light bounces off this water and bounces into the central space, as well as, and what they've done is they've also got louvers over the top. So it controls the amount of light that actually enters into the building. That's the front view of it, and you can see again the louvers. And you can see into the building. So there's transparency there, which is amazing, because also if you think about it, this is a public building. So if there's engagement with the public, that's another conceptual thing you want to do, is you don't want your people that are serving you, your public servants, to be in this ivory tower that you can't access. So there's also a connection, a conversation that's happening between these two things, these two entities, the public and the public servants. So I just want to get the right image here. Here it is. All right. So, and also you'll see is what happened is that the inside of this building is a silvery aluminium cladding. Whereas the outside is this dark, there you go, actually that's a better shot. The outside is this dark aluminium. So the outside isn't reflecting, but the inside is. And what's happening is this light is coming in, hitting this water, bouncing up, hitting these very shiny, reflective internal finishes, and then bouncing all inside that internal courtyard space. So what that means essentially is that the inside of the building isn't dark, and the outside of the building also not. And what that looks like in section, let's do it better. Let's just move this. What that looks like in section is you're getting light from the front, and you're getting diffuse light from the back. So the shadow area is actually very small. And the funny thing is, in that exact space where the shadow is its greatest, and you'll see that this kind of hits that, so this is actually not like that. This is diffusing up as also, it kind of does a squiggle line probably. But this zone here will have reflected light that bounces up. So the actual shadow area that you're creating is very small. And if you go really tall with this space, it means that this bounce light, this diffuse light, will be able to penetrate deeper into the building. So this whole space here is well lit. Now, why is this so important? Well, it's because people are in this building. And we want our people to be happy. We want them to be productive. We want them to feel the time of day. We want them to have views. We want them to feel like they can explore and kind of see outside. That's kind of what the views, but let's do that anyway. And all of this leads to a better building. Now, Fuxia, you might think, okay, cool. Like we deal, when you're painting, when you're drawing, we act with light in a very direct way. You know, we got a light source, we shade the one side. There's maybe some bounce light that's happening off around the side, so this is a bit darker. And it's the same with architecture, but the big thing with architecture is in painting, you're considering it. You're asking yourself, you're planning it so that you get the most effective or the most beautiful kind of image. And in architecture, it's no different. I've got some examples here of buildings. So yeah, this is a bathroom. And you'll see there's this direct source of light. Coming from the sky, from the shadow line that you can see here. And then it's bouncing off these different finishes. And it's creating a glow all around. And see here, this side here, this has got this beautiful, soft, diffuse light that's happening. And all of it is kind of framing this beautiful outside bath. And what we're doing is we're actually creating a subject and a spotlight that's casting onto that subject. And this will be like your mice sitting around the spotlight. Where does that light come from? And also, what is it framing? That's one example. Another one, this is a courtyard. And what they've done here is they've got the pond in the center. So all of this beautiful light is entering through here. And you'll see it's a very soft, very gentle light. And it's hitting this pond, and although there's plants and things that are blocking the light, it still bounces off. And it creates this beautiful, soft glow around it. I've used a lot of Japanese architecture images here. I really like Japanese architecture. There's a beauty and a simplicity to it that precedes the coldness of modernism. So you'll see another thing that's interesting is that they've got these slats in the background, and that's a motif that's being carried throughout. And it's even here on the verticals, on the horizontals here, and there's smaller elements over here. So there's a consistency that's happening throughout there's like they call it architectural language. It's the kind of using the same same words or same like you're not using, let's say you're not mixing English with Swedish, with German, with French, with Afrikaans, with all of these different languages, and then trying to make a sentence out of all these different languages. So what you do is you create, you try and use only English or French or whatever it is, and that's what this is essentially. It's creating a language and using that language to self-refer to itself. So it creates a sense of a unity and a sense of oneness. And you'll see here there's this direct light that's happening, and direct light that's happening. And over here, this is where what I'm interested in, is look at these beautiful shadows that's been created. And they're not harsh shadows, they're very elegant, soft shadows, because all the light that's coming in here is diffuse, controlled, soft lighting. And here's the harsh, sharp light. This is direct from the sun, and this is indirect. And the two are contrasting each other. So how interesting is that this architect has been able to put the harsh and the soft together and created a richer image because of it. Because there's this direct layering of these two very interesting kind of elements. And think of it as like a painting. That's exactly what's happening here. This architect is thinking in terms of painting. We've done that one. Again, you'll see the heavily Japanese influenced kind of architecture. Light. Alright, so and what the Japanese do, which is so successful, is they create, so again, here's this very harsh kind of shadows that are happening, but then they use trees to soften it, so that's why the shadows have these beautiful broken diffuseness to it. And then also they use these paper walls. And you'll see here, look at how beautiful that light is. It's not a direct harsh light. It's allowing light to come through, but it's this very soft glow. There's a subtlety to it. There's a softness to it. And again, by using this timber that's got a slight polish to it, it's also bouncing light upwards. So the floor finish is also influencing. Same with the ceiling. Is influencing the kind of light source, the kind of mood that you're creating, the type of lighting of the space. Even the wall is bouncing light. Alright, there's a lot of those. I'm just going to leave that for now. Last thought. So as we've said, we've had the sun kind of move around the front of the building. And I mentioned this diffuse soft light a couple of times now. And where that comes from is that if you look at a building in 3D, and it's got its perfect orientation, which means that in the southern hemisphere, north, west, south, and east. In the north, this will be flipped, obviously. The sun rises in the east, and it keeps going until it sets in the west. So you'll see the southern side gets basically no light, direct light. I know in summer the sun rises a bit further back, and in winter it rises a bit more forward, so its loops are a bit shallower. But the point is just that this southern element here gets no direct light. It doesn't get light that enters into it. It always gets light that bounces off things, or light that is in this area here, and it softly enters into this space. And that's why, going back to the office analogy, studies are brilliant spaces to have on the southern side, because you get a very soft, gentle light throughout the day. There's no harsh shadows that hurt your eyes and creates glare. Whereas the northern side, that's perfect space for all your living rooms, bedrooms. Another thing that's interesting is that if you were to create a plan of your building, in terms of light, north is there. The front side and the sides. So if you think about waking up in the morning, what's the first thing you want to do? Is you want light to enter into your bedroom. So all your bedrooms you want to have on the east. The north is where you want to have all of your living rooms. So that's dining, maybe not dining, probably TV room, lounge. Actually, no, dining would probably be part of that. This corner here and this wall here, west facade is generally a very harsh and hot facade. So what you do is you make this a very thick, solid, concrete brick element. Yeah, absolutely, Fuchsia. It's very nature focused, which is why I love it so much. The kind of buildings that I design for as my main focus are lodges, and they're so one with nature. So this idea that blurring that line between inside and outside and using natural materials is so important when you're designing lodges or buildings in the bush, and that's why Japanese architecture does exactly that. And they're like almost like elves, you know, how they are just so one with nature in terms of their buildings. Or at least that was always the case. I don't know if it's like that anymore. I've never been. So have you been to Japan, Fuxia? Sorry, I just want to kind of finish this thought here. And then the last thing is the south. Now, if you think of a kitchen, for instance, it's got a lot of like stainless steel pottery, that kind of thing. You don't really want sharp, blinding, glaring light coming in there. So a kitchen is very good on the south side, the diffuse side, as well as your study spaces, and lastly your bathroom spaces. Because you don't spend a lot of time in your bathroom, so it can be cold. It's also got a lot of it's got tiles, porcelain, that kind of thing, so you don't want glare. So that's why this southern side space is actually a beautiful and very interesting space. Yeah, also do. You'll have to learn Japanese though, which is apparently quite hectic. Not to speak it, the pronunciation is quite simple because they pronounce every kind of any letter, but it's a very it's very different, you know, the way it's constructed. Yeah, okay, I think that's actually it. Oh gosh, we went for 40 minutes today. That's I was supposed to go for half an hour. Anyway, is there anything else, Fuxia, that you want me to talk about, or that you feel that you need to understand a bit better? Otherwise, there will be more talks of this light conversation, because it's as you can see here, it's not simple at all. It's very complex. There's a lot of different things that are taking place. You know, you have to consider there's materials, components that attach to it. I mentioned this west facade hot wall, but I actually don't want to go into that. It's too complicated. There's this diffuse southern side. There's where you place certain functions, or program is what we call it in architecture, where you program different elements of the building, how you shade it. So there's actually a lot going on in this subject. Anyway, I think that's enough for me. Have a great day, and we'll see you on Bjorn. Otherwise, hope to see you again. If there's any topic or things that you want me to talk about or understand. Hi Mel, how you doing? So the requirement for natural sunlight, I assume you're asking what is the law for any room having light, access to natural light. And generally the law is, and that's quite a universal thing, because a lot of the so the laws in South Africa come from England actually originally, and there's also some Dutch codes, because it was all to do with the codes that were put in place. America will also have lots of codes from England, as well as from probably France as well, and because of colonization and diaspora of people, those codes and rules were kind of moved around the world. So like Brazil and South America will have a lot of Spanish and Portuguese laws and so on and so on and so on. The law is essentially, if it's a livable building, a livable room, so if there's people spend time in it, bedrooms, living rooms, lounges, kitchens, bathrooms, they all need to have natural light. The size of it is not determined, so you don't have to have a specific size to it. There is a guideline. They say, I think it's 10% of square meterage of the floor. So let's say, for instance, your room is, let's make it simple, 10 square meters. Then your window has to be 1 square meter. That's a guide though. It's not a fixed thing. It's just, it's ideal. But any storeroom, for instance, doesn't have to have natural light. Any corridor, so movement space, doesn't have to have natural light. 15. Can I get back to you on that? I'll have a look and see if there's. I think 15 also rings a bell. Yeah. I think the thing though is that with the kind of glass that we have access to, the kind of technology that we have access to, we generally just try and go as big as we possibly can, and what the budget allows. So there's no bottom limit that you have to hit. You're generally trying to go, okay, let's just maximize the amount of glass that we can. Yeah, so I hope that answers that question. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad, Fuxia. Thanks, Mel. We'll catch you guys again on Monday, probably. I put up a schedule that kind of describes the different things that will happen on which day. So if you're super interested in something specific, hey, Roland Manser. How's it, guys? Wow. And so the schedules kind of describe what's happening on which day. At the moment, I'm still kind of figuring it out, so there might be changes as we go along. But yeah, anyway, cool. See you guys at Bjorn. Take it easy. Have a good day. Or good night, depending on where you are in the world. Cheers.